Hello and welcome to All for United, and it's another one of those just for United transfer shows. You know how it works by now, many of you. We look at all the major stories that are surrounding United from the past few days. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by my regular guest, Hader. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, all good. Great to be back on again.
No, great to have you, mate. And today I've got two newbies with me from the All for United family. Very good contributors in our group. We've got Kieran and we've got Matt. How you doing, boys?
Yeah, good
Thanks
stuff.
for having us.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we weren't planning on talking about Jadon Sancho today, but I'm sure everyone's seen the news that's broken over the last hour. Quotes from Fabrizio Romano, who's starting to say now that the deal is at an advanced stage. And interestingly, news that the deal now is all sort of hinging on how the deal will be structured, if you know what I mean. So how much United pay up front and how much sort of add-ons will be involved. And if you watched our Sancho special on Friday when we had Ronan Murphy on for goal, he sort of laid all this out to us and explained that this was going to be the case. So a shout out to Ronan. I hope you enjoyed that show, and we hope to work with you again. We hope to work with Ronan again in the future because his insight was brilliant. And he was a couple of days in front of the news over here in Britain. So thanks for that, Ronan. So on the Sancho deal, quickly, guys. I'll come to you first, Kieran. What do you make of the news that we've heard today?
I think it's an interesting one. It's something we've been waiting for a while, because I think even dating back to like last year, there was always rumors between the two clubs. And for United fans, I think the earlier this can happen, the better, because we're sick of kind of what happened with Wan-Bissaka last year, what happened with Maguire, where we're waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for a transfer to be done. So even the fact that we've seen it from Fabrizio Romano there is that hopefully it means that it's done within the next few days. So then we can kind of crack on with the rest of our business that we need to get done. Because again, preseason training probably starts in about a month. So it's really like we have a quick Europa League campaign and then straight into it. So the earlier we can get these deals done, the better.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. And obviously, Hayley, you joined me on Friday for the Sancho special. Well, I think Ronan was right, wasn't he? What he was saying, kudos to him. So it looks now it's all going to be about how that deal will be structured. How do you feel about the structuring of the deal? How do you think, how much do you think we're going to have to pay up front, would you say?
Yeah, hats off to Ronan. He was completely spot on. He did say about 80% chance that it would happen and that it was all down to the structure of the deal. Honestly, if we can get away with paying no more than £70 million up front, I think that's a phenomenal deal for us. As you've seen in the past, we do structure deals this way, but to sign a player of that quality and also that age, he's got longevity that if he's signing at the age of 20, I believe he could be, having that right-hand side to himself for the next 10 years. So I think, in all honesty, the add-ons have to be realistic as well. We've seen in the past where we saw the Martial Ballon d'Or one, which we're starting to see him hit some really good form. But obviously, I think that was very unrealistic, and especially the way that United have been over the last few years. I wouldn't say any player in our squad would be touching the Ballon d'Or, but fingers crossed we might see Bruno next season, at least in contention. But I think that it's a very fair fee, and spreading that over 3 years, I think we're getting decent value for money. He's a phenomenal player. I'm a massive fan, and I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm a bit worried that he's going to join, and will he be able to adapt?" The guy's British. He's played in the British youth system his whole life. He's only been in Germany for a few years. The German league's a very decent league. I wouldn't say it's perhaps on par with the Premier League, but I think the top sides in Germany are better than some of the ones in the Premier League. And he's done it week in, week out, 20 goals, 20 assists in 40-odd games, or 44 games, I believe. So I'm really excited. Let's get through the door early and let's focus on the likes of Jack Grealish, a defender, and a few more if we can do that, because this is a massive summer for Man United. It's a turning point for us, I believe. It's a massive statement. It's integral. We get in our targets early, and we're looking to progress in this project under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Cool, yeah. And Matt, what about yourself? What's your thoughts on this? Are you looking forward to getting Jadon in?
Yeah, I mean, Jadon he's been my number one target for almost 2 years now. I think it's been pretty obvious the right side was pretty lacking on United's side. And Dan James in the beginning showed promise, but then we saw a massive tail off, and then I think it just emphasized the need for someone like Jadon. So hopefully by the end of the week, we can all just relax on that front.
Yeah, well, let's see. I mean, we're all super excited about Jadon Sancho, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about him much more over the next week or so. I mean, this deal getting close. Kudos to all for United Twitter account as well, by the way. Shout out for them. They also said that they expected the deal to be done by the end of this week coming. So that's still got a great chance for happening. So if they get that right, great shout out to Ben and the team there. Now, as always, guys, we want to hear from you. You know, we're getting some good interaction on our Twitter platform and all our social media platforms. Give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. There's plenty of great content that's on here that some of you will already know. And obviously, people new to the channel, you're going to see some great stuff coming up in the coming weeks. And actually picking up from some of the conversation that's been happening on our social media this last week or so, it seems to have been sort of centered around the possible signing of a centre forward. Now, towards the end of last week, just before we did the Sancho special, there was quite a lot of news about the potential signing of Raul Jimenez from Wolves, because apparently Wolves are looking at a striker that plays for Sporting Braga. But Kieran, I'll come to you. What do you make of these storylines? And I don't know about you, but I sometimes struggle to trust the Portuguese media when it comes to breaking transfer news.
Yeah, I find it hard to trust them, really. I think this kind of originated probably a couple of months ago, because we saw a couple of the kind of tabloids linking Jimenez with United. And I feel like it probably has stemmed from that. We, as United fans, we kind of know that you have to be wary to trust the Portuguese media. The amount of times we've been linked with, like, going back, whatever it is now, 10 years to Nicolas Gaitan, which I think for a good 6 years that we were, we were linked. So, like, I think it's hard because even when the Bruno Fernandes one was going, I think a lot of people struggled to know what was real and what wasn't, because it was the same kind of newspapers again. Now, I know the link came from one of the news outlets over there, but again, I would find it very difficult to trust anything that they say. I think, wasn't it just yesterday that, it was either today or yesterday, that United used one of the newspapers to kind of say that what they were reporting in Portugal was complete rubbish, which I think it's something that we would all agree with, because you kind of know who to look to when there's real news and when there's not. And I think there's not really been a credible one in Portugal in relation to transfers with England anyway, and especially for Manchester United.
No, definitely. And I think it was telling that United came out yesterday quite, like you say, on the defensive and quite annoyed that all of a sudden they seem to be a club that many agents and maybe selling clubs are using in order to drive up the cost of their players. And Hader, you know, is it a real detriment to United that, you know, media outlets, clubs, agents are doing this to United in terms of trying to sell their players, you know, trying to make out that there's interest from United there to bump up the price for the club? Should United be that bothered about it, or should they take it as a compliment, really?
It's a little bit of both. I think before I address that, Kieran makes a really great point about the Portuguese media. And I seem to remember when we were linked with Bruno all the way in the summer, and the Portuguese media were often, you know, pushing out conflicting stories. And we saw that last summer there was reports that Bruno was on the verge of signing for Man City, Liverpool, Tottenham. There was all these sort of clubs. So I do sort of take it with a pinch of salt. But looking at who the source is, it is RTP, and they're considered to be quite a reliable source in Portugal. I'd say they're probably perhaps tier 1 or tier 2. So for me, I think there's a long-standing interest there. I think there is interest. I think he's on our list of targets. I think Ollie likes him. I think he's a wonderful player. He's one of my favorite non-Man United players in the Premier League. I think he's an excellent striker, very much in the Zlatan mold. But what we have to understand as United fans is that we're going to get linked to hundreds of players every single window. And as soon as you do that, agents are using that as a way to tout more interest. Players using that for contract increases. I always cast my mind back to Sergio Ramos. That was a quite painful one, wasn't it? And you look even with Dybala last season, that was another painful one. Antoine Griezmann, another one. That's a hat trick. I could go on. So when you're looking towards, I suppose, Man United as a club, we have to understand our stature on the global stage is huge. Clubs are going to use it to drive more interest. They're going to use it to force other clubs' hands. I mean, I seem to remember when I think I was listening to a podcast and Tim Sherwood was on, and he was saying that when he was manager of Aston Villa, they were trying to sell Benteke, and Liverpool didn't want to pay. I believe it was 35 million. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember, but it was a big fee. Liverpool didn't want to pay it, and what Villa did is they leaked Man United interested, and within a couple of days, Liverpool signed him, and that's similar with Firmino when he was at Hoffenheim. So clubs are doing this to either hurry the buying club up, push the price up, or the player himself and the agent are looking for a bigger payday. So while it is annoying, us as United fans need to understand and learn how to decipher what is true and what is not, and we should not get carried away, and we should not jump at every single report and say, oh, this is an outrage, why are we looking at this player? For example, Jack Grealish is available for 80 million. He's not going to go for 80 million. He'll probably have to push for the move, and although he's played for Villa his whole life, it's his boyhood club, Man United not stupid enough to do that, and I think people just got to be a little bit patient. That's what I would say with the Sancho deal, that for me it was always going to happen this summer, but United are starting to learn, I think, and Ed Woodward perhaps, I don't want to praise him too much because it's still a lot of problems, but he is starting to learn that you're not going to go in and give them the price they want. We've got to negotiate. Everyone knows we have money to burn, really. We're a massive club, so I would take it as a compliment that we're such a big club, but also it's a negative because there's that Man United tax, which we're seeing consistently. And
yes,
in Italy, they'll go and buy a player. Lukaku, for example, was 60 odd million or 70 million. But if United wanted to buy him, he probably would have cost 100. So
yeah,
it's positives and negatives. But Man United, they're a top club, and we have to expect that, as one of the biggest clubs in the world.
No, I definitely agree. And actually, like you said, going back to your point, Kieran, it's a fantastic one on Gaetan. I swear I've seen him holding up about 5 different United players, but yeah, he's never seemed to get the deal over the line. So it's always felt like it's a day away or whatever. It's a fantastic point you make. And I think those 2 papers that we're talking about are Ojogo, I think, is one, isn't it? Is it?
Yeah.
Something like that. I think that's how you.
One.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that they're the sort of tabloidy sort of newspapers we get over here. So it's a little bit like the Kasper Schmeichel deal that sort of broke the other day in the Sun. I would take that with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, and if I am wrong, it might not be the worst deal ever. But I do think certain papers, you have to be very careful what you believe. Coming to you then, Matt, I mean, obviously, this might just be a case of United putting 2 and 2. Sorry, not United. So it might be a case of the media putting 2 and 2 together and making 6. When it comes to this deal, because obviously Wolves are looking at a striker from Braga. But if there was any truth in this deal, what of him? What of Jimenez? Do you feel he's would he be a good fit for United? Is he the type of player that would thrive at Old Trafford?
I think so. Yeah, like if we get Sancho in, and let's say you put him in for a Martial just for a game or 2, he's going to get a load of chances with Sancho delivering a balls with Rashford. The way he's almost changed his gameplay to become almost a playmaker, he'll get a lot of service from there. And then, I mean, obviously you have Bruno and Pogba in behind feeding him balls. I think he's almost going to offer kind of like what Igalo gives to United, it's a different option from Martial, someone who's going to body up the center back, someone who's going to post up, someone who's going to collect the ball, combine, and just be a real poacher in the box.
Yeah,
and
cool. Sorry. Yeah, carry on. Carry on.
I mean, so me being from America, and I'm so close to Mexico, where Jimenez is from, the hype down here, especially where I'm from, is immense. So for another Mexican to be linked with United is huge for us over here.
Yeah, no, and look, it's one of the things, and we should always be skeptical of United going on the defence as well. Let's be honest, they got quite annoyed last summer when they were being linked with Bruno Fernandes, apparently, didn't they? And we all saw how that ended in January. And come January, United probably will have a need for a centre forward because obviously the Igalo loan will run out. So if they take it as far as January, it could be a deal that they'll look at again in the summer, and we could have a similar sort of saga to what we had with Bruno last summer. Anyway, that remains to be seen. But actually, Ada, a striker that I would be more excited about the potential of signing would be someone like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Obviously, Arsenal seem convinced that he's going to sign this contract and that he's committed to the club, but yet nothing's really happened at this stage. I mean, there's news today that they're actually making an official contract offer soon. But wouldn't Aubameyang be an even better option for United as a striker, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a tough one. For me, I think Raul Jimenez is brilliant, and as it's been said in the media, that Ighalo is going in January, and we don't have a target man sort of forward in our squad apart from Ighalo. I think Ighalo is good, but I'd be concerned if Martial got injured and let's say Greenwood is playing on the right, that we'd be relying on Ighalo for 10 games plus. But Aubameyang for me is probably as close as you're going to get to guaranteed goals. And you look at him, he's an absolute world-class forward. Nobody can argue with his record, and it's frighteningly good. I mean, wherever he's gone, he's scored goals. He was excellent at Dortmund. He's come into Arsenal, and he's just taken the league by storm. He's always at the top with the likes of Aguero, Vardy, Kane. He's one of the best around, and 60 goals, 11 assists in 95 appearances in all competitions for Arsenal over 2 years is phenomenal. And I think what stands out to me is how he's shown fluidity and variety of movement when he gets into dangerous areas. Throughout his career, he's shown this. He's had the ability to accelerate from a standing position. And that's particularly impressive when he uses it to burst into gaps, onto through balls, to pull defenses out wide. And I think what's the most impressive thing about him is his timing and his awareness is as good as anyone around. And he's a master of that off-ball movement. And you see it a lot of times when Arsenal win the ball back high up the pitch and they're on the counter, they play one pass through, whether it's Ceballos or whether it's Xhaka, for example. I mean, I don't think they're particularly good players because you just got to think that if it was Bruno and Pogba playing, how much of a field day he would have. But what's so impressive is the way that he comes from left to right and he just times it to perfection, before the offside trap, and he does so well with that. And I think the ability to shoot off both feet and create that half-yard of pace is really incredible. And for me, when I'm looking at the strikers that I want to come into Man United, although I like the sound of Raul Jimenez because he is that target man, he scored 17 goals and 6 assists. So again, Jimenez is up there with Rashford and Martial in terms of goals scored. But what Aubameyang will offer you is versatility. You can play across that front three. And you see nowadays, Chelsea have signed Timo Werner. That versatility and that fluidity. Look at our front three. Martial can pull left. Sancho will be able to go centrally or left. Rashford will go centrally or right. They can all interchange, and that fluidity is obviously key to the way Oli wants to play. So when you do say you'd get more excited about Aubameyang, I actually agree because he can, again, offer that fluidity. You've got to think that a lot of people say, why do we need him? We've got Martial. And I don't think there's many people better with that off-ball movement than Aubameyang. And I don't think there's anyone as good as scoring, not many out there, as good as Aubameyang. But if Man United want to win the title, you look at Man City, they've got the likes of Aguero and Jesus, they've got Sterling. They've got just a plethora of options. I think two concerns for me with Aubameyang is, one, his age, 31. And I know that shouldn't be a problem. His injury record's generally quite good, but we've got to look forward to the future. I think he'll want to come in and start straight away. And I think, two, his hold-up play is, with his back against the goal, is not the best. He plays particularly well when he plays off Lacazette, which is why I think he's been shifted out to the left a lot. Because I've always thought essentially he could score more, but Lacazette's probably superior in that aspect of the game. And I think when he struggles to impose himself on games, that's when Arsenal don't have a lot of the ball and he just goes missing. And that's a bit of a problem for me that you've seen in big games. I know he's done it well in the semis and the final, but I think when you're looking at him, he wants to win trophies. He's obviously an ambitious person, and I don't think his ambition is matched by the Arsenal board or owners. That's no secret. Arsenal owners are using Arsenal as a cash cow, pretty similar to the way the Glazers are, but they're not as bad. But moving on to, I suppose, Arteta, they've actually got a very, very good manager there. And if they're not going to back him with the ambition, you're going to lose Aubameyang. So there is interest from PSG, I believe, and in Italy there is a little bit of interest. Whether they're going to be able to get him signed on, I don't know. But I think, if I'm being honest, after the game in the FA Cup, when he said he wasn't sure whether he was staying, I thought there's doubts. But I think he will sign on because they're not going to sell him to a rival. And I think he's really happy there. Honestly, I think he's happy. He's settled in London. He seems the main man. And clearly the style of play Arteta's playing, he's thriving. So I'm not too sure what's going to happen with him, but I just don't see United having any chance. But if that chance comes up, as many have said on Twitter, it would be an RVP-esque signing. And you can't say no to guaranteed goals, can you?
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go next, and I'm going to come to you, Kieran. I don't know what you think, mate, but it really takes me back to 2012, and that was a great year for me, 2012. And, the whole thing about the whole thing around Van Persie, I suppose the only difference is that was quite a shock. It sort of happened quite quickly with Van Persie. Not a lot of people saw it coming, but it does sort of smack of that a little bit. And I think that's where I get my excitement from it. I can see something similar like that. And again, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I get what you mean by kind of the idea of when Van Persie came, because everyone expected him to go to City. I think it was probably reported for this summer, even beforehand, that they were interested. So when he came to United, everybody was very shocked. And obviously he scored a lot of goals for us that year and basically won us the title. I think the difference between that team and what would happen with Aubameyang now is I think Van Persie was the final piece that Ferguson needed to topple Man City. But right now, I don't think Aubameyang is the type of striker that Solskjaer wants. In an ideal world, Solskjaer's striker would have been Haaland, because he's the one that he wanted in January. So that's where I see kind of the similarities in relation to like Raul Jimenez, because they play in a very similar way. They're one of their best traits is their finishing, and it's a little bit different than what Martial gives us. I think the benefit of if the Sancho deal does get over soon, that it gives Solskjaer a little bit more room to be able to rotate, because you would either have Martial, Rashford, or Greenwood on the bench to come on, or maybe even if Sancho's played a run of games, he can come on. The one that I wouldn't be surprised if it would to happen if we were going to sign another striker is probably what we heard in January with Josh King. I think that it's someone that Solskjaer knows he can trust, and if the striker he wants to build kind of the attack force behind, like if it was Haaland, he knows it's not going to get him in the next 12 to 18 months. So even if he can get many different options, it's kind of why we were linked to Dembele from Lyon, that he's more that kind of physical presence, but also is able to finish very well and kind of goes with his record. But I wouldn't expect a deal for Aubameyang. I don't think Arsenal would be able to stomach losing another striker to us because of the amount of times. And also, I don't think we want to have another repeat of Alexis Sanchez. Because, again, if we were to sign Aubameyang, he's going to be on those crazy high wages, because the reason he probably wants to leave Arsenal as well, that if they're not offering him a big enough wage, he thinks he can get elsewhere, which if there's teams like PSG that are in for him, or Juventus, they're going to be able to offer him that amount of money. And do we want to be giving that to a player who's 31? And realistically, if you ask any United fan in 3 or 4 years' time who you want their striker to be, I think the majority of us would say Mason Greenwood anyway.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Kieran. And talking of Arsenal, sorry, that's camera switch from it. Talking of Arsenal, we're now going to go from attack to defence, probably quicker than Arsenal would do it. Forgot to track back. And a story that we first talked about on this show last week, as when you again joined me, Hayder, the whole thing around Gabriel Megalhaes, who's the Lille defender. Now, over the last week or so, this sort of interest in Gabriel seems to have firmed up a little bit. In fact, I'll come to you first, Matt, on this one. What do you make of this? Obviously, his representatives have apparently been in the UK. Is this a deal that would excite you?
I mean, speaking as a general United fan, a lot of people are probably doing their YouTube research right now on him.
Yeah.
Over here in the States, we don't get much Ligue 1 coverage, but I have watched a bit of Lille this season just because of the hype they got last year. Yeah. And honestly, he's pretty impressive. He's strong in the tackle. He's the left-footed ball player that someone like Ole wants. He's young, so he fits the profile. Yeah. We have plenty of Portuguese-speaking players here, so he'd feel comfortable. As a player, though, I mean, I'm not completely sold on him. I'm kind of feeling the way I kind of felt about when we first signed Lindelof. Yeah, he seems very good, but at the same time, because of his age, because of the league where he's coming from, well, you just never know, especially in the French league. I don't know. He wouldn't be my first choice of a young center back, but who knows?
Yeah. And Kieran, coming back to you on this one, should United be concerned? I suppose that, with all due respect, we are being linked with players that look like going to clubs like Everton and Napoli. Is that a problem? I mean, obviously we had this with Yerry Mina last summer. I suppose you could compare it to. Should United be, I don't know, should we say, fishing in the same ocean as Everton when it comes to looking for players?
I think the reason why that's been coming out is probably because if we look as an overall, there's not that many world-class centre-backs that are out there anymore. Every single one of them has some sort of negative. It's like where people criticize Harry Maguire. I think the majority they do is because he's slow, because they see certain mistakes that he makes. But when you actually look at some of the kind of advanced stats, where I think one I usually look at for defenders is that how many errors have they made that has led to an opponent's shot on target. And what I read was that Maguire had only led in 1 in the Premier League this season, but you had players for Man City that left in 4, Van Dijk left in 3, but you wouldn't say that. But obviously you look at Van Dijk and he's on a different level, but they bought him from Southampton, who he came from Celtic when he was younger. So I think there's many different ways. I think one thing that we have to look for is the traits, because no matter who comes in, because we've been linked with Torres, the young kid from Monaco as well, and then obviously Gabriel. Now, I actually had to do a story on this for last week, and I was mainly looking at Torres and Gabriel and seeing kind of which one I think would suit more. Yeah. And I think the similarities are there, where they're both left-footed, they're both comfortable on the ball and good passers, which is exactly what Solskjaer seems to want. The difference is that Gabriel, when he plays for Lille with Font, is that he's the more deeper centre half. So Font kind of goes up there and commits himself, while Gabriel's a little bit further back. That worries me a little bit, because that means how good is his awareness. Because if he's always the furthest man back, then most things are in front of him. And when that happens, he can use his athleticism, which is kind of one of his strengths. He has good pace, and also he's able to, again, supply the ball. But when I look at someone like Torres, who we were linked with, I just think that he has that little bit more in his game. I would say he's a smarter defender, where he doesn't have to use his body. He doesn't, because basically about a second or two before something happens, he gets in the right position. The only difference is he's probably going to cost a lot more. I think I read it was between 50 to 75 million euro, while we've seen that for Gabriel, it's between kind of 25 to 30. There's not a big difference between them, but if he came in, I guess it's good, because we're going to be losing defenders. Like we've already seen it come out that Rojo is not going to be playing for Manchester United again. I'd assume some deal for Smalling happens, and I'd say Solskjaer probably wants Phil Jones to leave as well. So you have to bring in bodies. Obviously, we would hope that Axel would be able to get over the injuries that he's gotten this year, but bring in someone like Gabriel, who's only 22, and with kind of the upside that he has with that athleticism, I think it's a deal that United should be looking at, because it'd be different if there was so many obvious choices for a centre half. So if that was the case, then I wouldn't want to be looking in the same way as Everton. But right now, I think there's such a mix of players that it's really who suits your style of play. And I think Gabriel and also Torres for Villarreal, they both suit it very, very well. So if either one of them signed, I think it would be a good addition. It's not going to be one of those where you're signing your best centre half for the next 10 to 20 years. Whoever comes in is going to have to develop. But I think he has the traits to kind of work well with Maguire.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously, you mentioned there about Torres, which is obviously another name on the defensive shortlist that apparently United have drawn up. But the other name that keeps popping up in the world's media, but like in the last couple of days in the British media, is Inter Milan's, I suppose, aptly named Milan Skriniar. Now, United's main rival for this deal seems to be Manchester City, but obviously they seem now like they're quite a long way down the road in terms of signing Nathan Ake. Although you could probably argue they may need a couple of centre backs as well as a lot of other clubs. There, it doesn't completely rule Man City. It doesn't completely rule Man City out, that the fact that they're going for Ake. But Ada, how would you compare someone like Skriniar to Gabriel? And if Man United got one or the other, are we looking at two similar defenders, or are they very different players?
Kieran makes a really good point about sort of what's available on the market. I think in an ideal world, Man United would be going for a Koulibaly or a Skriniar. I think it's quite clear we need a top centre-back. I'm not really sold on this idea of bringing, like, for example, a Joe Rodon. I think Gabriel is better than that. I'm not sold on bringing in a younger centre-back because it's quite clear we have got Mengi in the academy who's looking like he's developing nicely. Obviously, so much more development to do. Game time, we don't know how he'll turn out, but there's flashes there. Tuanzebe, we all know his qualities and how suited he would be to a partnership with Maguire. He's got the athleticism to make up for Maguire's lack of athleticism, should we say. But for me, I don't think they're similar at all. If you look at the way that Gabriel plays, I mean, obviously I spoke about him last week. He is athletic. He is left-footed, for example. He's very good on the ball. I think there's similarities with Skriniar in terms of his ball-playing ability. But what we've seen this year is that Skriniar's really struggled in the back three. And for me, he was probably top 3 centre-backs in Serie A, one of the best in Europe. Koulibaly as well. But what we're seeing is with the Antonio Conte situation where he's essentially put him up for sale because he's just been a very, very massive disappointment this year. And they've had an unsettled defence. Diego Godin hasn't settled down either. And De Vrij's been brilliant as usual. But there's real issues there. So it all depends really on whether Conte is going to stay, because we've hearing murmurs that he's unhappy. I mean, Conte could complain about anything. You know, he could start a fight in a room by himself. You know, he's that sort of person. So you're looking at the reports about Allegri perhaps or Pochettino. So that, for me, this deal really does hinge on whether Conte is going to remain as manager. But looking at what Skriniar is good at, I think he's clearly a strong tackler, aerial presence, combative on the ground. I think all these qualities are suited to a Premier League centre-back. And I guess that's kind of the issues that we've seen with Lindelof. I think Lindelof's a brilliant defender. I think Maguire's a very good defender. I think both are very good Premier League defenders, but they just don't work together because neither of them are particularly quick. Maguire needs someone next to him who has that athleticism, that's, you know, sort of that recovery pace. And with Lindelof, I think that clearly his physical deficiencies are just getting exploited by teams. And I think Lindelof's a very good player, but clearly I don't think they work together. So looking at Skriniar, you can see how that would work with Maguire. I think that now that we've seen Sanchez move, there is opportunity to have a conversation. And I was talking to one of my good friends. He's a big Inter fan. He's got a few links there, and he was saying that it's very possible that Skriniar could go. If it was not in a swap deal, it would be close to £60 million, which again, I think that's also out of Man City's reach. And I was talking to another friend of mine who does a Napoli podcast, and he was saying that in terms of Koulibaly, they don't want to let him go for anything less than 85 million euros, and even Man City are not willing to pay that. Hence why they've gone for Ake. But I can see them bringing in another centre back, and perhaps the way to get Skriniar is a player plus deal, and that's where it comes on to Chris Smalling. And I think it's just crazy that they would sacrifice Skriniar for Chris Smalling because, firstly, the age difference about 5 years. Smalling's older. Smalling, I would say, is a good defender. I don't want him back at Man United. I think a lot of people have been saying they want him back, but he's clearly happy in Italy. It suits his style. It wasn't working at United. So I think where I'm concerned about Skriniar is that his pace is a problem, and you're kind of bringing in a player that's better than Maguire, in my opinion, a better defender. Similar players, he's just as good on the ball, I'd say. But again, you're playing that high line. I think he could get exposed. So you're bringing in someone who's better than him, but you're not bringing someone that's actually making up for Maguire's deficiencies. So that's why going towards a Torres or for example, a Gabriel is a much easier option. But again, money is tight, and that's the issue. In an ideal world, like I said, Man United would go and sign a top world-class centre-back. But I'm a big fan of Gabriel. I do like Torres as well. Whichever one comes in, you're addressing that position. You're bringing someone in who's also played, like Gabriel's played Champions League this year or European football, I believe. So, a small sample size, but from what you've seen, he can play at the top. And I wouldn't be too concerned that Everton are going in for him, because let's say that Gabriel goes to Napoli. It's too many times we've seen that we go and spend 60 million to buy him when we're buying him earlier in his development. So I think Skriniar's a world-class defender, but he would get exposed next to Maguire.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, again, fantastic insight, and thanks for doing that comparison for us, Ada, because I mean, obviously we're linked with all these players, and it's not all United fans out there are privy to watching Serie A, to Liga, so it's really good sometimes to get a bit of a lowdown on a player. Now, Matt, I want to come to you because I just want to finish off by talking about a couple of players who look like will be leaving the club this year. Not quite sure where or how at the moment, but Chris Smalling, I'm looking at the players who are obviously based out in Serie A. Chris Smalling, Alexis Sanchez. You know, there's been a lot of talk about Chris Smalling coming back, but if United are going to sign another defender, I don't see him getting in the team. You know, Chris Smalling's been at United now since 2010, I think. You know, he's been loyal enough to the club. Do you think actually it would be best for all parties if he stays over in Italy? Because I think he's enjoyed his season there and he's obviously playing well.
Yeah, I think it's better off that he stays in Italy, whether it's with Inter or he stays at Roma. I just think with someone like Smalling, with his age, and I think with his deficiencies that he has, I think the Italian style of play just fits him better. Kind of similar to how people were outraged with Ashley Young performing so well. It's not because he's a decent player. It's because, I mean, he's playing for a super dominant Inter side who, I mean, barely came second, but they came second only to Juve. And if you look at the way they play, it suits the way Ashley Young plays, and it's the same as Roma. The way Roma plays, it's set up for someone like Smalling to just get in there, body up the number 9, and just win the ball and give it to the midfield. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I think it's just better suited. He's been a good servant, loyal servant. He had glimpses under Van Gaal's first season where it was like, oh my Lord, like it looks like we have Beckenbauer all of a sudden on that side. And then Van Gaal's second season came around, and I mean, he was okay. But after that, it was just no turning back. It was the same Chris Smalling that we saw decline under Moyes. So I don't know. I think he's better off staying at Roma.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think his career at United's been obviously blighted by inconsistency and a few injuries. Kieran, I'm going to finish with you and on Chris Smalling and Alexis Sanchez, both of them. You know, what chances do you think that United will come to an agreement with, well, if it's not Roma for Smalling, another Italian club? I've seen Juventus linked today, obviously. Alexis Sanchez, I've seen today, has been included in Inter's Europa League squad, so they must be pretty confident of getting a deal done for him to stay at least another season. But how important for United do you think it is that they get a few of these players sort of out the club this year so that they can continue building and moving forward?
Yeah, it's really important. I think especially with the Alexis Sanchez one, that one is probably the one that needs to be done the most, because again, the wages that he's paid at the club just completely ruined the structure that we want to have, because again, he gets paid way too much for, like, I think we're still paying about 150k for him being over at Inter Milan. And just on kind of the point with Chris Smalling, I think that 1 year with Van Gaal, that was when he was Mike Smalling, not Chris. That's probably the reason why he played well.
His alter ego, wasn't it? That's what it was.
Yeah. I think though, the good thing about Smalling having a good season in Italy is that, let's say United were interested in someone like Skriniar, you then have the option to kind of weigh up the two clubs against each other. So if Roma really want him and then we kind of link him to Inter Milan, we may be able to get a little bit more for him, which again, that's something that I don't think we've done as a club very well. I think the only kind of decent return we've gotten in recent years was probably for Romelu Lukaku last year. And it's something that I think needs to change, that like, if these players go out and perform well, which it seems like Smalling has done, well, then it shouldn't just be a small deal to get done, because at the end of the day, you either want them or you don't. Sometimes clubs have to. It's the same reason why when you were mentioning the one about Benteke before, that when a club wants someone to pay a certain amount, you kind of then will try and make sure that there's interest with one of their rivals, which that's what I think is why the Inter Milan conversation comes up. I don't think Inter Milan will end up signing Smalling and Alexis Sanchez. I think it's more likely that Smalling eventually goes back to Roma. I think it's just kind of Man United basically getting Roma to pay the fee that they want for Chris Smalling. But again, I think those two are kind of the most important ones to kind of get done. The Alexis Sanchez one is because of the money, and I think the Chris Smalling is because he wants to be in Italy. You don't want a player coming back that doesn't actually want to be there.
Brilliant, Kieran. Yeah, no, thank you. And they say all heroes don't wear capes. Mike Smalling definitely didn't wear a cape, although I do think he used to have a parachute behind me when he was running, so I'm not sure. But anyway, I just want to finish up there, guys, by saying thank you so much for your contributions today. It's been a brilliant show. Thanks for your insight. I hope you've enjoyed being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get you on again because, I mean, as you know, it's transfer window at the moment and the stories are erupting all the time involving United.
It's going to be crazy.
Exactly, yeah. But that's all we've got time for now. There'll be another transfer show on Friday. So I hope you can join us for that. Remember, guys, get involved. The conversation can continue on our Twitter, on our other social media platforms. Get your questions in, get your debating going. It's great to see people interacting with all these things. Give the video a like. Subscribe to the channel. And like I say, we'll see you on Friday. Thanks for joining me, guys. And I'll see you soon, everyone. Well done, guys. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
No worries. Thank you.